how it is. We are obligated by the Federal Register to open up for public comments at 1 o'clock.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just a quick overview of the permit zones and the permits. So here's the 5 locations for the permit zones: St. Clair, Desert Vista, Lower Sycamore, The Rolls, and Bulldog Canyon. And just a reminder, 1 permit would cover all 5 locations. And here's those 5 locations. So Bulldog Canyon was the existing permit zone. We added St. Clair to that, and I'll cover that in the next slide. So that's the free permit zones with that $6 processing fee through recreation.gov. Desert Vista, The Rolls, and Lower Sycamore currently have no fee. They are not under a currently managed permit zone. And here's the proposal that has not changed since we met in April. It'd be a $10 3-day permit, a $60 6-month permit, and an $80 annual permit. And that permit would be required per vehicle. And the processing fee is still to be determined. We're still working that out with recreation.gov, but based off of our last discussions with them, we're hoping that there should not be any processing fee with that would be added on to the users. We're hoping that that would be absorbed by the forest. So it should just be 10, 60, and 80. But we're still trying to finalize that with recreation.gov. So still to be determined, but that is our goal, is to eliminate any processing fees with this permit system. Next slide. So the St. Clair OHV permit zone was closed to motorized vehicles since 2005. So it's been closed for almost 19 years. And this was because of the Cave Creek Fire Complex. And it burned so hot that all the soil intensity, all the vegetation, everything just could not heal. Like all the flooding came through after all the monsoons. So we couldn't open it back up immediately. We had to just let it heal over time. So that's why it was closed for all that time. But over the last few years, we were monitoring it with staff and with volunteers. Trail, Tonto Recreation Alliance, and several of the dedicated volunteers that come out. They were helping us. They spent over 5,000 volunteer hours putting work into this area to survey the area, put up fence where it needed to, where we needed to keep people on trails, improve the trails, put up signs, making sure people knew where the routes were, things like that, just to get this area back open again. So they did a lot of work in this area. This is an amazing accomplishment. Next slide. So on April 6th, we finally got this area back open. After 19 years, we finally got it back open again. We did kind of a soft opening and kind of let the public back in, let them go check it out, see the trails. And then on May 1st, we started requiring that free permit through recreation.gov with the $6 processing fee. And the 1 permit would get you access to both Bulldog Canyon and St. Clair. So you could get the 1 permit, go online, get your permit, and you could go recreate in either area. The district was able to manage the area with open gates. So unlike Bulldog Canyon, where they've got the gate closed, you get your permit, you get the access codes to the gates. The district was managing St. Clair with gates open. So it was a lot more inviting. I will mention, we were very unfortunate. We had another wildfire come through St. Clair. So at the moment right now, St. Clair is closed. We're trying to wait for a monsoon to come through just to make sure the area doesn't flood again. But our intention is right after the monsoon seasons this season that we will get it back open again. But overall, I mean, this was a huge accomplishment. After 19 years, all those volunteer hours, we finally got this area open again. So St. Clair is one of our OHV permit zones that's in our travel management decision. So this was something that we were trying to implement. We were trying to get this back open. Next slide. So speaking of travel management, so our record of decision was signed in 2021. This took over 10 years of NEPA, including multiple environmental impact statements to get that signed. It designated over 1,300 miles of open roads and over 2,200 miles of open trails, 8 OHV areas, which an OHV area versus an OHV permit zone. The OHV area is like a cross-country travel area. So there's no designated routes. It's just an area where people can travel on the land. It is designated 4 OHV tot lots and the 4 OHV permit zones. So Bulldog Canyon, Desert Vista, The Rolls, and St. Clair. You'll notice that Lower Sycamore is not on there, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. The 2005 the 2005 travel management rule requires all national forests to designate a system of roads, trails, and areas where motor vehicles can travel. And then that's also associated with a map. So we're supposed to put out a map that shows all those routes and areas where the public can travel. As far as implementation goes, we're obligated to implement that decision in a timely manner. So the Tonto is still working on getting our map out, and we should have that out pretty soon. We're working on kind of finalizing all that data to make sure that's accurate when it goes on the map. And then we can also implement everything in phases. So as you've seen with the permit zones, St. Clair, it's an slow implementation process. So we just got St. Clair done, but things like funding and resource limitations kind of slow down that process. I mean, it took us 5,000 volunteer hours to get St. Clair open. But the record of decision does address those things. It says that we can do additional NEPA to start getting things open, implementing in phases like the permit zones, and utilizing RIA fees to help us with those things, to help provide the funding and the resources that we need to actually do the work that's actually outlined in our record of decision. And then we're also seeking additional support from partners and volunteers to help construct the tot lots and the OHV areas as required in travel management and our record of decision. Next slide. So the Lower Sycamore OHV permit zone, that one was not listed in that record of decision, all the permit zones listed, but it was analyzed. So it was in the list of alternatives, it just wasn't chosen. So if we are approved to collect fees in the Lower Sycamore OHV permit zone, we just need to do a little bit of additional NEPA, and we can go back and look at what was analyzed in the record of decision for travel management, and we can use that to kind of tie it into some of the NEPA to make it an official permit zone and put it into our travel management. And when we advertised our OHV special recreation permit for all of these permit zones, a lot of the comments, the public comments, were directed at Lower Sycamore. A lot of folks were saying, hey, we really want to see more law enforcement out there. We want to see some rehab. We want to see this area protected and dumpsters and things like that, specifically in Lower Sycamore. Next slide. So on June 11th, we met with Game and Fish and we went over the 3 letters that they submitted, their comments for our fee proposal, and tried to address any questions that they may have had. And then we sent them a follow-up letter kind of summarizing everything that we had talked about in our June 11th meeting. That should be in your packet, so you should have been able to read through that. Here's just a couple items to just kind of bring those up. One of those things that I did want to point out is that in our last meeting in April, it was brought up that if the Tonto followed through with our proposal, that Game and Fish was not going to be enforcing out on the forest. But it was clarified in our meeting on June 11th that it was meant that Game and Fish would not be enforcing the Tonto's OHV permit. Not that they wouldn't be enforcing anything, just the OHV permit. And that's totally understandable. So the Tonto law enforcement will take care of enforcing the OHV permit. So that was a good clarification. And then another thing that Game and Fish brought up, and I think some of the RAC members brought this up too, was how are we going to clarify for the public what's needed for motorized uses versus non-motorized uses, and how are we going to clarify that this is truly a motorized permit and it's not just for OHV users? And that was a very good question. So we're going to make sure that all of our signage out there, all of the online education is very clear that this is for motorized uses. This is for anybody motorized out there. It's not just for OHV users. And that anybody non-motorized out there does not need the permit. So if you're parking in the staging area, if you're riding your bike through the area, you don't need a permit. So it's just going to take education. It's going to take proper signage, but we'll make sure that we've got good diagrams, we've got good education to make it very clear for the public. Next slide. Our budget plan. So this should also be in your packet. So hopefully you got a chance to read through that. So I will go through this in detail over the next couple slides, but for this first one, this kind of just shows the phases. So we kind of split up the budget plan in different phases. And the first phase, so this slide just kind of shows you what we focused on in each phase with the budget plan. So the first phase we kind of limited our own budget with the expectation that we're not going to have a whole lot of money the first phase because we won't be collecting a lot of fees yet, right? So the first phase, we expect to be hiring temporary staff, purchasing UTVs, renting portable restrooms, and the intent on the portable restrooms is that we want to see where the best spots are for restrooms. And then in future phases, we can actually install permanent vault toilets. So we're kind of testing the waters, right? Plus portable restrooms are cheaper. So we're trying to save money in phase one. And then installing signs. So phase one will be super important to get the signage out there to educate folks about the new system, about safe riding, about all these things. Phase two will allocate funds towards law enforcement, MCSO, game and fish agreements, hiring more staff, purchase a trail dozer and UTVs, install select vault toilets based off where we found the portable restrooms successful, get roll-off dumpsters out there, and construct new staging areas. Phase three will allocate funds towards more agreements, hire trail crews, invest in trail maintenance and rehab, get more vault toilets out there, and expand staging areas. So next slide, and I'll get into more details of these. So phase one, so here's the breakdown of those things I was talking about. So there's the projected cost for the signs, salary for seasonal positions and forest protection officers. Trail, we intend to put some money into a trail agreement. Trail does a lot of great work for us out in the field. They install signs for us. They do maintenance of the trails. So we want to invest in an agreement for them. For UTVs, for our patrollers, we need to get them out into the trails to be making public contacts, to be doing trail maintenance, to be helping pick up the trash out along the trails, things like that. Trailers to haul those UTVs around. And you'll notice there's less trailers than UTVs. In phase one, we were trying to save money, so you'll see more trailers purchased in phase two. And then Wildcat staging area, that's on the Cave Creek district in the Desert Vista permit zone. So when I talk about staging area improvements, this is usually going to be like blading and then compacting, putting down gravel, installing that glue. You'll see in that picture right there, it's a dust abatement project. And then putting down like riprap and any of the drainages alongside the staging area, putting pipe rail or boulders around the boundary, installing a vault toilet, and installing an education center or a kiosk. And then portable toilets in various locations throughout the permit zones. So that's our goal for phase one. And this could fluctuate. Phase two, so signs, so the goal is for signs to kind of decrease in phase two. Like phase one should be the most expensive cost for signs because we're installing everything immediately, and then signs should gradually reduce throughout the phases. A cooperative law enforcement agreement with Maricopa County and Game and Fish, Forest Service law enforcement agreement, salary for seasonal positions and Forest Service protection officers. This increased from phase one. depending on how hiring goes, we didn't think that we'd be able to get a whole lot hired so quickly in phase one, so we want to up it in phase two. A Swaco trail dozer, we currently have one on the South Zone, and we use and abuse that thing right now. So we hope to get another one and be able to do some really good trail maintenance out on those trails. And then the trailer, obviously, to haul that around, trail agreement, and 2 additional fleet trucks. So with hiring more staff, we need to get more trucks to be able to haul, to get those people around in the field, right? 2 UTVs, 3 trailers. So like I mentioned before, we were trying to not spend so much in phase one, so we needed more. We'll get more trailers now in phase two. New vault toilets and the pumping contract to maintain those. So depending on where the vault toilets are successful, we'll install some, or sorry, the portable toilets are successful, we'll put some vault toilets out there. These could be staging areas, these could be right at the entrance to the permit zones, it could be a little further in. It just depends on where they end up working out. Constructing the new Ranch Road staging area. So that's again in the Desert Vista area on the Cave Creek Ranger District, a very much needed area. And similar construction to what I talked about with the Wildcat staging area. So, you know, the blading, the pipe rail, all those things. The Palo Fierro and Cottonwood staging areas, those are in the Rolls permit zone on the Mesa Ranger District. Again, similar type construction activities. And 4 roll-off dumpsters for various staging areas throughout the permit zones. If we are able to swing it, we hope to get dumpsters done in phase one. That's something that's very desirable, like right now, to get dumpsters out there. It just depends on funding. Like if we can do it, we need to do it. So, okay, next slide. So for phase three, so most of these things, anything and everything that you see is going to be rolling over into the next phase. So signs, again, just kind of dropped in price, cooperative law enforcement agreements, Forest Service law enforcement agreement, salary again, trail agreement, natural restorations and other partnership agreements. So if we can get them out there, I mean, they're already out there, but if we can invest in them to be helping with rehab areas, helping with cleanups, things like that. Educational and interpretive materials. So again, this is something we're already doing. We're attending the OHV Expo. We're attending educational events in town. We'd like to continue to do that and expand on that. To be able to hand out, you know, how we hand out Smoky swag and things like that, to develop things that are OHV related, to help educate about safe OHV operation. I think Game and Fish already does that. State Parks already does that. Well, the Forest Service wants to do that. Come on. So if we can help, you know, educate a little bit more, you know, talk to people about the permit zones and how to be safe, how to do all these things. It takes a little bit of money to make those brochures, make the cool little keychains, things like that. Educational annual fleet costs. So those 2 new trucks that we just bought, it costs to maintain those. 4 more vault toilets again, and the pumping contract that goes with them. Trail crews and brushing. So some of those trails that are getting overgrown, we'll get some trail crews out there. Trail rehab and resource improvement. So this could be like getting some heavy machinery out there. So the ones that we can't quite get with our trail dozer, we'll hire some big crews out there with a big dozer and go fix. If they're really getting eroded away, we'll hire some good work out there. 4 roll-off dumpsters, again, just kind of rolling over from previous phases, and a Pobrecito staging area expansion. Similar work to the other construction. All right, so that's the first 3 phases. Yeah. Next slide. And with future phases, it'll be similar things. So we're just gonna have to play it by ear. So we might have more staging areas that we want to expand on, and we'll see what the public needs, where the needs are, what needs to be done. But those are what we're aiming for, the first 3 phases. So here's some pictures of just things that we've been doing and things that we would like to continue doing. So some of the outreach events that we've done, you know, participated in Four Peaks cleanups with our partners, and you know, handing out some good materials with Smoky and with trail and things. That's what the public likes to see. They like to see us out there. They like the info, they like the maps, things like that. So we want to continue to do that and to be at more events and handing out more cool things. Next. Okay, in the last meeting, one of the questions that was brought up is what's the difference between the Tonto Pass and what we're proposing? So I just wanted to kind of bring up here the Recreation Fee Authority and how the passes and permits are tied to that language. So we are proposing a special recreation permit fee versus the Tonto Pass is actually a standard amenity fee, or in some cases an expanded amenity fee. So the Tonto Pass being a standard amenity recreation fee, that type of fee kind of requires certain developments in a given area, like a permanent trash receptacle, developed parking, a toilet, things like that. And then you can charge a fee. And similarly, the expanded amenity fee is usually like a campground, a boat launch, a dump station, things like that. And then there's also certain prohibitions of where you cannot charge those standard and expanded amenity fees, like dispersed areas of low investment or where people are just driving straight through, things like that, versus the special recreation permit fee, which is what we are proposing. So, and it says in there that the secretary may issue a special recreation fee to charge in relation to a special recreation permit. And then you can issue these and related to specifically motorized recreational vehicle use. So, and that's what we're proposing. So we've got our permit area and we're proposing the fee related to the permit. So if you want to go to the next slide, there's some more details there. So at the bottom there, there's one more thing. So when you go to buy your Tonto Pass, you can buy that at, Circle K, Big Five, anything like that. And you can buy like 5 of them. And you can just like hand them off to your brother, hand them off to your friend, and they just got to put it in their car, right? It doesn't matter who bought it. It's not tied to any person. When you buy a special recreation permit that has a fee with it, it collects certain information about that permit and it's tied to that permit. And it's tied to the permit and the person, and that person is responsible for the permit. So versus that pass, it's not tied to any person or vehicle or anything like that. So with our travel management record of decision, it states in there that a permit system is an effective tool for minimizing negative recreational impacts within high use or sensitive natural environments. And within these designated OHV permit zones, individuals will need to acquire an OHV permit to use them for motorized recreation. So right there, it says that these are OHV permit zones and we're requiring a permit. So that's why we're proposing the fee is related to the permit zones versus, just a pass that's not tied to any permit or any person. And then in our forest land management plan, it also says consider using a permit specifically for OHV areas. And that goes along with our travel management record of decision saying that these are permit zones. So hopefully that kind of answers any questions about like why these are permit zones, why we're proposing a fee for permit zones versus just using the pass, because a pass is just charging a fee just to use facilities. Next slide. I think we skipped one. Can you go back one? Perfect. Okay. So the online permit, it's a convenient way that the forest can collect that necessary data that ties it to the permit. So currently the one for Bulldog and St. Clair is administered through recreation.gov, and that's what we'll continue to use for the 5 permit zones. And it holds the permit holder responsible, and it kind of makes them click, I accept and I understand these terms and conditions, makes them read all those rules and regulations before they can actually purchase the permit. And in the case of Bulldog and St. Clair, it would give them the gate codes at the end, but we won't be having gate codes. We won't have them closed. So it just, that permit is just easy with it being online. And yeah, it gives them, at least it gives them all the information online. So next. So there are still some other opportunities for folks, at least so for in the permit zones, the forest honors the 5 national fee-free days, and we're even looking into other fee-free days that we would consider honoring. We are also looking into partnering with local libraries to use that cultural pass, not only for the OHV permit system, but even for the Shauna pass. And then volunteers, there's an opportunity for a fee waiver for volunteers that have documented 40 hours or more of volunteer work in OHV areas on the Tonto or on adjacent public lands. And there's more details about that in our implementation plan. And then there's still 88% of the forest's motorized routes that are outside of the permit zones. So even though these are desirable areas and they're closest to Phoenix, that's where everyone wants to go, there's still 88% of the routes that are free, that you don't need a permit for, that would not have any kind of charge, that are on the forest, so people can still go recreate with a motorized vehicle. Next, I think that's it. Yep. All right. So what kind of questions can I answer?
Okay, I can't see you if you have a question, would you from the RAC members only, could you identify yourself and ask a question? And I'd like to ask you one right from the very beginning. As I understand the presentation before, these fees stay to this particular area. They don't go up to work on Roosevelt Lake or someplace else. All these fees that you collect here will be used to manage this piece of property as you described. Do I understand that correctly?
Right. They stay in the permit zones.
Okay. Is there any other questions from any other RAC members?
Hi, Bill. It's Sharma Torrens. I have a question or a comment and a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kelly. That was really comprehensive. I appreciate all the information. You really addressed most of the questions I had. And this, I just read the materials a couple times, and I just want to clarify this in my head. I know for Lower Sycamore, it talked about how it was 1,300 acres was mentioned at one time, but that it was inaccurate because it's actually 35,000. Was it just a typo, or is that, yeah, I just for my own knowledge,
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was a mapping error. So we grabbed that. So when I talked about OHV areas versus permit zones, we grabbed that shape that was the actual Lower Sycamore OHV area, that cross-country travel area from our travel management. And it wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't supposed to grab that and publish it in our proposal. So once we saw that, we were like, oh no, we weren't supposed to publish that. So once we saw that, we corrected it and we put in the actual shape it was supposed to be, and made sure that that was out there for public comment.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate that.
Do we have any other comments?
Bill, we do have Paul David with his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Dolores. Chairman Drake. My question for Kelly, and very great material, and I appreciate it, especially the summary from the June 21st meeting with the Arizona Game and Fish, and I think that for many of us on the RAC, that meeting that you held and the opportunity to dive a little deeper into some of the details was exactly, or at least for me, one of the reasons that I voted to table. My question and our emphasis is on is the post funding acceptable and will we approve it? And so this question is kind of in the weeds, but I noticed in your proposal and that all of your areas in those 5 areas where you're going to add fees either now or soon, and I understand near the actual OHV trails why you would exclude any target shooting, and I know that there's both lead and people have a tendency to leave their trash and use trash for targets. But it seemed like a very large area to exclude from any target shooting when the roads, you know, if you want a quarter mile on either side or a half a mile or even a mile on either side of the roads, there's you know 95% of the area it would not be you wouldn't have conflicts with OHVs. And so I was just wondering, and that's not really too relevant to today's decision, but I was curious about that.
Sure, that's a very good question. And that you're right, that's a separate NEPA project that they're still working on, and that's they're not even working on right now. It's kind of frozen before they will continue with that. But that is something that they have discussed is a target shooting prohibition in the permit zones. But I believe that's in our forest plan, is them managing the permit zones so that there's no target shooting in them. And that is, it's because it's user conflicts, right? People shooting across trails and things like that, and the litter, and I think it's also related to like watershed and things like that, as far as like the trigger trash and all those things. It's a big combination of all that stuff. But we have talked with Game and Fish thoroughly about like Lower Sycamore. We don't want to prohibit target shooting in there. That's a desirable place. So Lower Sycamore would be an exception for that for sure. And then the other 4 is something that we once that project starts moving forward, with them reviewing all the NEPA for target shooting, the other 4 would be considered for a prohibition for target shooting.
Thank you for the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I have Devin Quintana raised his hand to speak. I'm from the Tonto National Forest. Devin, go ahead, and then we have Larry Howery from the RAC with a question.
Yeah, thank you, and apologies about my attire. I'm currently in Southern California on a fire assignment. But yeah, I just wanted to chime in a little bit to supplement Kelly's response, and thank you, Mr. David, for your question there. We really appreciate that. So to add on to Kelly's response to that question, we are currently on pause right now for the Dingle Act process. That is the actual act and process that we have to go through to adhere to the requirements for proposing a target shooting closure, as well as restricting any access. So we have started down that path. We have had several conversations with the Game and Fish Department regarding that. And as Kelly mentioned, you know, that would require a separate public comment process, publication of Federal Register notice, as well as a coordination with the local Game and Fish office, which is ongoing. And in addition to that, consultation with the affected tribal communities, so the federally listed tribes, and a consultation and coordination with the Sportsmen's Roundtable, which is basically an NGO organization of sorts nationally that would include the local Game and Fish Department. So that is currently tabled for a variety of reasons. But the intent there is to really work through all the stakeholders to address some of those concerns, and in particular for health and safety, those user conflicts where those areas are just not compatible because there are no appropriate backstops for to mitigate shooting. You know, I don't want to use the word safe because some things that we do are inherently dangerous. But we do want to work through in providing some education plans, engineering controls, and areas that are safer or where we can mitigate impacts and user conflicts. So that will be an ongoing conversation that we're going to have, and we will be working through that process locally, regionally, and nationally as we comply with the Dingle Act. So hopefully that kind of paints a picture for you, Mr. David, and answers your question.
Thank you. Was there another?
Yes, Bill, there's Larry Howery has a question.
I have one after Larry, please.
Yeah, Kelly, thanks for the presentation. Excellent job. I did have just a point of clarification. The article that Dolores sent out this morning in Mesa Tribune had a slightly different fee structure than the one that is in the materials. So I don't know anybody catch that, or could you respond to that?
Yeah, we noticed that. I think it was the old information from our original proposal, but we are proposing that 1060/80
Okay,
setup. Yep,
okay.
good catch.
And then one quick question, this is just more for my own edification. If you buy, and this has probably been covered in the previous meeting that I wasn't unable to attend, unfortunately, but if you buy a permit for these areas and you have several vehicles, the permit is linked to the individual, not necessarily to a specific vehicle, right? Is that
Right. Yep.
okay? All right. Thank you.
I do have Devin Quintana with hand raised with more comment, please.
Yeah, Mr. Howard. So to add on to Kelly's response, that was our initial proposal. You know, that's what we came out the gate with. And as we went through 3 years plus of public comment and responding, you know, to that internally, we've addressed a lot of those comments as you see in your packet. And we revised that because we did have some comments that, you know, users thought it was a little steep. So in incorporating that, that's where we revised that fee structure. And what you see on the presentation today is what will be implemented if we receive approval to do so. So to be clear, what went out was the original proposal. So it's not misinformation per se. It's just internally as we presented to the RAC and through the public commenting process, this is where we revised our proposal.
Thanks, Devin.
I have a comment. Is there anybody else in the RAC? I already made one, but anybody else that would like a comment before I make mine?
Yes, Jill Bennell has raised her hand.
Okay. Please go ahead.
I just have a question on each of those permit areas. Is the perimeter defined? Like, how do you know when you're entering an area other than the primary gate
Good
or
question.
the primary entrance?
Very good question. Yes, a lot of them have either pipe rail or fence boundaries. Most of them, it's just the main road. Like the main road is very defined that kind of shows where that boundary is. So we'll have to improve our signage to show like, hey, you're now entering a permit zone.
Yeah, additionally, a lot of these areas are defined by topography as well. So just based on the delineated roads, pipe rail fencing for the staging areas, there are other types of fencing, including barbed wire, because there are active grazing allotments in a lot of these areas. It'll be a combination of things that'll delineate the permit zones on the ground, but we'll ensure through appropriate signage, education plan, et cetera, that it's clear to the public where the areas are that they're entering, where they will be required to have the permit.
So do we have a plan for like rentals? If somebody brings a trailer with rentals in a corporate event, does every person at the event need the $10 permit?
Right. Yep. Yep.
So with a caveat to that, so part of those, if you're the corporate events that do occur, those are permittees that already have a special use permit with us, which is a completely, it's similar to this fee authority that we're talking about, but additionally, they go through a permit process. They went through a NEPA process, decision making, and they have a special use authorization and also an operating plan. So those permittees have valid existing rights, and we'll be working with them to educate the public on, what the requirements are for that. But essentially everybody that will be in these areas will be permitted, quote unquote, permitted or authorized to be in there.
Thank you.
Steve, you had your hand up earlier. Did you still have your question?
I did, Mr. Chairman and members. I was curious, and I apologize. I may have missed this, and I looked at the pre-meeting materials and so forth. I was looking for projected revenues. I did see the costs, year 1, 2, 3. I'm curious what the revenues that were projected would look like. And I saw some numbers because I did look at the permits and what you expected in terms of the number of permits, but I thought maybe there's an anticipation that those numbers will go up with the new areas coming into play and so forth. So I was just curious, and if I missed it, I apologize.
No, you're good. We didn't talk about that today. So we are expecting about 2 million a year. And we haven't really projected that out in the future yet because we don't know. It's hard to say. So that's what we're basing off the first 3 phases of our budget plan is 2 million. And then we're going to play it by ear because we're just unsure if people are going to want that 6-month pass or the annual pass. But we've been judging it off of what people have been buying with the Bulldog Pass so far. Sorry, I keep saying pass permit, the Bulldog permit, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, but you make a very good point, like with adding additional permit zones, that will affect it. And we've also been discussing adding additional permit zones in the future, like Hewitt Station and other areas across the forest. And with those, like the permit fee would still stay the same. So if we were able to add those permit zones with a new proposal in the future, obviously doing more NEPA and public comment for those, then that would increase our revenue as well, hoping that more people would want to buy the permit, but the cost for the permit would stay the same. So I think all of those things are fluctuating numbers and fluctuating events, right? So.
If I may, if I could ask a second question, and I was really curious how the changes are communicated to the general public. And I did read in the information that was sent out kind of a general plan, but what have you found to be most successful? Because I've got to believe some people pay close attention to this while others don't, and they get out there and they're like, oh, wait a minute, what? So how do you address that?
As far as like responsible recreation out there, or
Just the understanding that they're required to have a permit and there are fees associated with that and so forth.
I really think that having people out there makes a big difference. Having Forest Service people out there. It doesn't have to be law enforcement, even just having forest protection officers out there to talk to people, whether they're like right at the entrance or down by the trails. When they see us out there, it helps a lot. So and it doesn't have to be writing tickets. It can just be, at a booth, talking to people, like I said, handing out educational information, or whether we're out there, on the quads, on the side-by-sides, talking to people like, hey, how you guys doing today? Do you have your helmets? Things like that. It makes such a huge difference. And we get a lot of appreciation from folks. They say, oh man, we're so grateful to see you out here today. It's, the trash is less because you're here, things like that. I think that makes such a big difference.
And the press release goes out, I'm guessing it goes to all the folks that are prior permit holders or any number of other, means of or avenues of approach. Can you talk a little bit about what that's going to look like in
Yeah,
terms of notifying people beforehand? So I would hate to
right.
get out there to find out, okay, I need to go back into town to get, or I can't get online to get this permit.
Right. Yep. Yeah, we'll do a lot of public outreach ahead of time. If we are recommended and approved for this permit fee, then we've got our implementation plan is that we wouldn't start actually implementing until January. So we've got plenty of time to start outreaching to folks, to put it, online in the newspapers, get our signs made. So we would be reaching out to as many OHV clubs as we could. We'd be reaching out to all the like commercial companies in town, let everyone know. We'd reach out to anyone that we could think of that's related to this type of activity to make sure that folks know that this is a new thing. This is coming out there. Like, make sure you get it. And then there's pretty good cell reception in most of the staging areas, most of the access points out there. So our goal is to have that scan and pay option so that when you get there, as a last resort, you can buy that 3-day permit when you get there. And then if you decide that you want to get the annual pass, you can still buy that online too. But at least when you get there, as long as you got the cell reception, which, like I said, most of them have it, then you can buy as soon as you get there.
Very good. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I may add just a couple of points, Mr. Trussell, on the projected revenue. One of the other things that just to make clear for the RAC and members of the public that are listening in, one permit will gain you access to all the permit zones as well as future permit zones if we were to go through NEPA process and decision making. We would include that into the same permit process. So that's one of the reasons why on the fluctuating, between year to year, we're not quite sure what the revenue is going to be, but just through what we know, we've been issuing in the past for Bulldog, we've projected that. So hopefully that's clear. Our intent is to manage these across the forest similarly, and to one permit will gain you access to all the different permit zones. And yeah, and in addition, our communication plan, is a part of that implementation plan. It'll be a separate dynamic document that we're updating with all the points of contact, including elected officials, et cetera. So our intent is to make notifications, to coordinate this effort, and to put out plenty of public information, as well as utilizing social media and other types of media avenues. So yeah, that's all part of the plan as we move forward in the implementation of it.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a quick comment, and then Richard, I see you have your hand up too. We're going to go into public comment period here shortly. And as many of you are kind of new to the RAC, the way we handle that, Dolores will give me a number, and if, like I said, if there's 2 people, it's 15 minutes, and if there's 10, it's 3. I pretty well have to enforce that, and will enforce it. If there's questions afterward, I don't see any reason we shouldn't get them brought up. It's a public comment period. It's not a question and answer period. So if the public has a question, that would be a little out of line. If they have a comment on any of these, on this particular issue, that would be a very appropriate, and we're very open to hearing that comment because it helps us in our decision when we make a vote later on. And I'm going to step on you, Rich, for just a quick second, but this, from my standpoint, is the beginning of going down a slippery slope, and it's the fact that we're doing this, and Forest Service has done an excellent job and so much better than the one we had before, and I think that's a good result of having a RAC meeting and dealing with the Forest Service, because we're all better now. But we're going to, I believe, push this off to other areas. And there are people who are going to say, I'm not going out with my 2 kids and myself and pay $30 when I can go across the highway and just ride up and down in those areas. So that will be, if this is successful, we will be going ahead and looking at other areas. And the BLM is probably going to come in and say, well, we need to look at these areas around Havasu and et cetera. So I believe we are beginning to change the direction that the RAC will go, because the state is growing. Not that we won't handle the things we do, but this is going to become an everyday event in my opinion, because you're going to move people around who want to recreate. As a rancher, that kind of concerns me, because I have to manage for that, and I knew that when I got in the ranching business. But it changes the dilemma of managing, not only for the agencies, but also for the people that make a living on it, and as well as the recreation. So, as I said, my ask is, and this is all this leads down to, I would like to formally ask the Forest Service to come back to us once a year and tell us how it's going, so we can sit back and say, yeah, we did okay that, and it did clean it up. It's much better active, and there's really no problems. I just hate to vote it one way or another, particularly vote for it, and not have any follow-up. And if we don't put something on paper that makes sure there's follow-up, we'll never know. All we'll know is that we thought we did the right thing. I would like to ask the Forest Service formally to, in their meeting with us in the RAC once a year, come back and bring us an update on what their budget was, how it's worked out, and the successes and failures, so we as a RAC can make better decisions. Thank you.
So, Mr. Brake, we're at the top of the hour, but I can respond to that in probably 10 seconds if I may.
Please.
So we're required to do annual reporting on Federal Land Recreation Enhancement Act reporting. So we do that annually on what we accomplish, and we can and we do intend on doing just that, and responding to that. And that'll be available to everybody as well as the RAC. And if you'd like, we can provide that report directly to you as the chairman, and you can distribute as you see fit.
I would like that. We have a tendency to go ahead and say we're going to do stuff, and then we all get busy and we forgot to do it, and nobody goes and looks at it. So that answers my question. If you would be kind enough to do that, Kevin, and make sure that the RAC members get at least once a year, so we know the successes and failures. Please, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go over to the public comment period. And Dolores, I need to have an idea, if there's possible, how many people we have that would like to make comments at this time.
At this time, we do have one individual that has mentioned or shown interest in providing public comment, and that is Rich Smith. If anybody else at this time is interested in providing public comment, please raise your hand to be identified so that we can allocate the time accordingly. And Mr. Chair, right now we do just have the one individual identifying themselves to speak. Be Rich Smith.
Okay, and Rich, thank you, sir, for coming in. It's not necessary that you take all 30 minutes, but if you need to, go ahead. If other people come in, you'll have to forgive me, and I'll have to ask you to wrap it up. So with that in mind, I appreciate you taking the interest and time to be involved in this, and I'm very interested in your comments.
Hi, everybody. Fortunately, I don't have anywhere near half hour's worth of comments. I just had a few quick things to follow up on some things that came up during the meeting. So one of the things, by the way, Rich Smith, I'm the president of Tonto Recreation Alliance. That's trail for short that you saw in the budget line item there. That's the first comment I wanted to make, is that the Tonto offering to support. Sorry, I had some weird message on my screen. Okay. So right now we're very dependent on funding from Arizona State Parks and Trails from their OHV grant program. That's been wonderful, and we hope to continue to be able to use that. It does put us at kind of almost a single source of funding. We do get funding from businesses who are in the OHV recreation business, but it's not that's not nearly enough. So any funding from this will go a long way to helping us with our efforts. And we do a lot of stuff with the Tonto that helps OHV recreation. A couple of little things that I heard that I wanted to add on to what Devin and Kelly said. We also we're solely involved with the Tonto. We have our own social media channels, and we have a lot of connections to clubs and other organizations. And so messaging and that kind of stuff, we work fairly carefully with the Tonto, and the permit information will go out through our channels as well. So we'll be helping get that message out there to our fellow off-roaders. One of the questions was about how are people going to know when they've entered a permit zone. So one of the projects that we have ongoing is a free interactive user map of the Tonto for OHV recreation. And so, for example, we already have the Bulldog permit zone and the St. Clair permit zones on that map. So if you're using that free map that we have to help you navigate and find out what's out there, those zones will be shown. So they are shaded a slightly different color, and they have information. If you touch that area, information pops up about the permits today. Will pop up about the fee stuff when we get to the point of implementation. So that's another way that the public will know that they have entered a permit zone. I think there was one other I guess the other thing is I said this in the last RAC meeting, that I started out not so much of a fan of the implementation details of the fee proposal. And I really want to compliment the Tonto on working with the public, gathering lots of comments, and really doing a good job of addressing those. I think they've addressed all the major comments, productive, serious comments that I've heard from people about changes to implementation. And I think the proposal is so much better now than when it first started. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to say, I do agree with you, Mr. Blake, about I think this is going to end up being a good thing. I hope, and I can see other federal land managers wanting to get in on this as well. And so just bringing this up to the RAC, one of the comments I made that was not exactly completely pertinent to the Tonto's fee proposal, but that, in my opinion, I think there ought to be some sort of broader discussion that starts about about more of a centralized federal land fee structure somehow, since the majority of land in the state that can be used for OHV recreation is federal, either BLM or forest. Instead of a patchwork of every land management area doing their own, I would like to see something broader than that. So I guess that's echoing your concern and maybe a suggestion for the future. And that was all I had, unless there's any other questions for me.
Well, thank you, sir, for joining. Those are good comments, and that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from the standpoint of all federal land for a fee deal. From my standpoint, adding a fee bothers me, but having trash and stuff all over the place out there, making it unhealthy, unsafe, and not a pleasant place bothers me more. So it's kind of like, I'm not happy with my vote one way or the other, but but something has to change. And so that is the comment I have. By the way, I'm killing time because I got to keep this open for 30 more minutes. So if there's anybody else in the RAC, I would also suggest, or JC, if you want to add anything to this would be a good time to do it. But if anybody should come into the public between now and 1:30, I have to invite them in. So JC, do you have any thoughts you want to say? I would just echo that I've gone through this for many years, and I've never seen a better presentation from the Forest Service than I saw in putting this process together. They were very concerned about our feelings, and they were concerned about the public's feelings. And I truly believe the combination of the RAC members and the Forest Service came up with a better plan than if either one of us would have tried to do it together. And my hat's off to you for the Forest Service for doing that. But JC, you got any more comments?
Yes, I do. I definitely wanted to compliment Kelly. Did an excellent presentation, and I really appreciate the work that was done on the management plan and the implementation plans. They're very thorough. One of the things Kelly brought up in the presentation was she clearly identified it's for all motorized vehicles. That's one thing that's missing in some of the templates, but I'm sure they'll add those in before they start posting and publishing news articles to the public. Because the Arizona state statute identifies an OHV as a vehicle that is not designed for highway use, which would exclude any motorized vehicles that are highway or designed for highway use, like Jeeps and trucks and cars and street legal motorcycles. So from that standpoint, I think it's an excellent presentation. I think it's something that that we needed before we could make any decision. And I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate it.
Sharma, do you have any thoughts you want to add to JC's?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Sharma Torrance. Yeah, I'll echo the comments. Fantastic presentation. I was really impressed with how much information was in there and how you addressed everything we kind of talked about last time. Um, I know this is JC's bailiwick more than it is mine, but for me, since he works with OHVs and trails and all that thing, but from my perspective, it's really about the mitigation of and resource concerns, mitigating any resource damage, environmental damage. And so I think we talked at the last meeting how generally speaking, this is kind of human nature that we treasure things a little more if we pay for them. And so and yeah, I don't in theory I don't like the fees, but I think it's something that needs to happen. So definitely so I just wanted to say that. But yeah, thank you all so much again for all this information. Really wonderful.
Do I have any other comments from the RAC members or public?
Yes, sir. We do have a few of our RAC members looking to speak. First up, Paul David.
Hi, Chairman Brake. As going through the different proposals and their pamphlet or their booklet about the types of vehicles, I was a little surprised because there's so little impact, and there's because it's electric, there's no emissions. Why they would include the type 1, 2, and 3 motorized bicycles? For like if you had a mountain bike without a motor, there's no charge to use the fees or to use the trails. But if you have an electric assist motor, then it does create a fee. And I'm just thinking that if you're comparing impacts on the road and the fact that there's very little. It's almost no footprint for an electric bike. Why they would be included, other than they fit the definition of motorized vehicle.
I can answer that question if you want me to.
Please.
Yeah, so that one's out of our control at the forest level, at the Tonto. That one's actually a nationwide policy for the Forest Service. That's just how electric bikes are managed. It's part of the travel management rule. 2005 travel management rule is that electric bikes are managed as a motorized vehicle. So if that changes, I know the Park Service and the Forest Service have been trying to line up together with that. But that might change in the future, because I know that they've been looking at that very closely about possibly changing that in the future. But as of right now, electric bikes are considered a motorized vehicle. So if it does change in the future, then absolutely electric bikes, if they are deemed not a motorized vehicle, then we would absolutely change it and they would not be required to have a permit. That's just how it is nationally right now.
Well, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
We've got Devin Quintana and then Paul Baumgarten.
Yeah, if I may add to that, Mr. David. So part of that, like Kelly said, it is considered a motorized use because it is a motor. And so there was an extensive public comment period. The National Park Service was actually the first out the gate, and the Forest Service emulated our public comment process before developing that national policy after the Park Service. So we're in lockstep with the Department of Interior on that front. And so while it may be true that electric assist and some of the even throttle assist e-bikes that are limited to a speed, there are emerging technologies, including full-on dirt bikes that do have rather large ranges on them that are emerging, and they do have the same effects that gasoline-powered or petrol dirt bikes. And I can tell you firsthand, being out here in Southern California, we're out here constructing contingency lines for fire suppression, and we had some electric dirt bikes whip right past us and we didn't hear them. You know, they snuck up on us and they were right by us kicking dirt in our face. So I'm seeing it firsthand, you know, here. And I can tell you that you know, it is coming to a forest near you. And along that note as well, that therein lies part of the challenge, right? Is that we're trying to find a balance of that. And we want to also make it equitable, right? Providing that recreational opportunity for folks. But to that end, you know, we still do have quite a few routes, as Kelly presented, you know, that are open, that do not require any type of fee, that are open both to, you know, all types of bicycles, including e-bikes. So that opportunity presents itself elsewhere as well without a fee.
Thank you.
Next, we have Paul Baumgart.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to say thank you to Kelly and the Forest Service for that wonderful presentation. It was very informative. I especially liked the line item budget plan and being able to see where the revenue would be going. Was great to be able to analyze that and also review it in your recent PowerPoint presentation. I guess my overall, my sentiments about the fees, I don't see any problem with a 6-month, 12-month fee, and I think that's reasonable for the OHV user community to pay that to use these highly sensitive areas that seem to be very popular and located, you know, near the metro area. $10 for the 3-day program seems to be something that might deter people, and I guess my question to you, Kelly, if I may ask, is should there be a significant drop off in users because of the implementation of that 3-day fee, and if it's expected that most of the revenue would come from that, does the Forest Service have the ability to go back and potentially amend that, maybe reduce that fee from $10, say, to $8 or $7 if they felt like it would increase increase the quantity of users over, you know, the period of the calendar year that you're looking to generate revenue? And what would that process look like?
Right. Our proposal is the 3-day, the 6-month, and the annual permit. So if we were to change that, we would have to come back to you guys to change those values. And Devin might correct me if I'm wrong here in a second, but the purpose of the 3-day permit is really just for people like coming into town or bringing a family member or something. We expect most people are going to buy that 6-month or the annual permit. So people that are local, almost everyone around here that's got OHVs or Jeeps or dirt bikes or anything like that, they're all going to want that 6-month or the annual permit. Yeah, we really only expect people buying that 3-day to be just maybe they just bought a brand new vehicle and they want to test it out, or they've never been to the permit zones and they want to see what trails are there before they really invest in an annual permit. So it's really just for people to really try out the permit system before they really buy the new stuff or the whole permit, you know. But yeah, if we wanted to change it, I think we'd have to come back to you with a new proposal.
Okay, no, thank
Yeah.
you. I apologize if I missed a breakdown on the projected revenue streams. I saw the annual revenue projection. I didn't know if it was broken down by pass type. So, but thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Baumgart, you know, just to add on to that as well, Kelly's absolutely right. Any changes to any fees, we would have to come back to the RAC, you know, to propose a change, whether it's to increase or decrease or completely change the structure. We'd come back and we'd do another round of public comment period, et cetera. Also, the $10 that you saw was the original starting point, and after public comment period, we did reduce that down to $8 for the 3-day. So, and that's you know, kind of in line, the users that go out to our day use sites already pay, you know, the $8 for that day use pass as well. So that's kind of in line for that, but except for getting, you know, a single day at like the Lower Salt River, for example, you would be getting, you know, 3-day pass for the weekend. So that kind of captures your snowbirds that are coming out to experience, you know, what the Tonto has to offer.
Right. Well, thank you.
I think we have Mike been on the.
Yes, Mike Quigley.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Apologies for having missed the first discussion of this topic, and thanks for the presentation today. I have a couple clarifying questions. So I'm a little confused. As I understand it, this is for any motorized vehicle accessing these areas, not just for off-highway vehicles, which I consider to be like razors and that sort of thing. Is that accurate?
Right.
So it's not really an OHV fee. It's a forest road access fee for everyone who wants to get on a Forest Service road in these areas, correct?
Right. It's a motorized vehicle use
Okay.
permit.
And if someone if someone has purchased an America the Beautiful all agency annual pass, does that cover them, or do they still need to get this pass as well?
No, because that's a different type of pass. I believe that's a standard amenity or an expanded amenity fee. This is a special recreation permit fee for the permit zones.
Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around why in these particular areas, driving my Jeep to get to a birding spot or a hiking area is considered a special use, where in other parts of the forest, that same activity on similar roads is not considered a special use.
Right, because so these are permit zones that were designated in our travel management for motorized use. It's a special area for that activity, for motorized use, a recreation area just for motorized use, versus anywhere else on the forest that if we're charging a fee for the boat ramps or use of the toilets where you're accessing the river, things like that, that's where you would use your interagency pass, the senior pass, the Tonto pass, things like that. These permit zones are for motorized recreation. That's where we would be charging the fee for that permit. You need a permit to be able to operate a motorized vehicle there.
Okay.
Does that help?
No, I get the explanation. I guess my concern is it just seems like it's going to be limiting access to those portions of the forest to people that want to pay for the motorized vehicle fee. And I share the concern that others have expressed that we might have a balloon problem where that just shifts motorized vehicle use to other portions of the Tonto where people don't have to pay the fee. So I'm curious. I noticed in the spreadsheet, which is very thorough, by the way, of revenue projections and how the money would be spent. I do see in there money for law enforcement. Would that law enforcement also be able then to go to the non-permit areas if indeed use was being pushed into those places?
So the funding collected from these permit zones has to stay within the permit zones. But any funding that we're currently paying for our forest protection officers and our law enforcement, we would be saving that money so that they could still, the money that we're saving, we could be spending for them to go outside in the other areas. Plus, we still intend to apply for grants, and that grant money can be spent on them going to the areas outside of the permit zones.
Okay, cool. And so just for clarity, like it's not, the money doesn't stay within the specific, like the Bulldog permit zone. It would be wherever it's collected for all the zones could be spent in all the zones. It's
Right.
like one big
Yep.
lumping. Okay.
Yep. One big like pot for all 5 permit zones.
Okay. And the lower Sycamore zone was not proposed in travel management. So I'm curious how that managed to make its way into the mix and if that requires some sort of a plan amendment.
So it was proposed in travel management. It was in one of the alternatives, and it wasn't selected for the final record of decision for travel management. So we're proposing for it to be to have a fee. So if we are recommended and approved to charge fees in those areas, we would have to follow up with additional NEPA to make Lower Sycamore an official permit zone. So we wouldn't be able to implement Lower Sycamore right away. We would have to finish that NEPA to make Lower Sycamore a permit zone before implementing that one. So we could only implement immediately those 4 permit zones that are official, and then we'd have to finish the NEPA for Lower Sycamore to make that one a permit zone with a fee.
Great. That's super helpful clarification. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I noticed I has his hand up, so I have just one last question, I think, for me, and then I can get off here. I'm also confused about the arrangement with Arizona Game and Fish in terms of enforcement. Like I see funding in the plan for them, but then I think I heard at the beginning of this meeting that they're not inclined to enforce the fee. So what exactly would that money and their law enforcement people be doing should this proposal go forward?
Right. It'd just be so that they could help enforce OHV laws, because it doesn't have to be for them enforcing the OHV permit. They're still out there enforcing OHV laws. So that's still helpful in the permit zones. It's still a helpful recreation activity out there.
Okay, so they would still enforce like don't go off the trail, the marked route. They just
Absolutely.
wouldn't care whether or not somebody bothered to purchase the permit.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Clay, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just want to follow up. Kelly, appreciate walking through and Devin as well. I think importantly, meeting with our Mesa office folks and working through some of this. I think for Mr. Quigley, backwards, since you asked the question before I started talking, the department will not enforce any fees associated with the permit zones. And I would also offer that we don't see a need for us to enter into an LE specific agreement, because this is just part of what we do within our statute authorities for those things. Although I did see that Maricopa was also identified. Maybe that would be an opportunity, but we don't see it necessary for the department. I think for the most part, we were able to work through all the concerns related with this. A couple areas I just want to point out, and I think, Mr. Chair, you may have mentioned this as well. One aspect is from a monitoring piece of what does that mean, not just for the resources, but also user behavior and the success of this program because of the fees is a key piece, and I think will help inform decisions that RAC may make in the future, as well as what this means for this area, because our concern, and I think Mr. Quigley, you brought this up as well. I know I've stated this before, is what does this do for users and then pushing them outside these areas, and then we just have a compounding challenge for us in the at least areas adjacent to the valley. So I think the monitoring would be a key piece of this. It sounded like what I heard Devin say was that they're required to do that, and that would be part of it. I don't know what that looks like, but that'd be a key aspect for this process. But otherwise, for members on the RAC, if I were to put this in percentages, I would say 95% of the challenges or concerns that the department have been able to be addressed. And the TANO was receptive and trying to work through the concerns and understanding what that means. I do think as a point of, maybe a little critical, is it's kind of clunky, and I said this before as well, the time span, right? Some confusion on Lower Sycamore, even the 1,300 acres and then thousands of acres, and whether it needs NEPA or not. It's just confusing for the public and that whole process. And so maybe this is not intended to be a low blow or anything like that, but in the future, not having something so clunky is working through it. And as much as even the nomenclature, Mr. Quigley, I think you mentioned that as well. Just we think about OHV, but that it's focused on motorized and what that means as well. So anyways, those are the key areas that I thought I'd share from the department's perspective.
I'd like to ask before Kevin makes a comment. Do I have anybody else from the public that's on that wants to make a comment before I close the public comment period out? Okay, with that in mind, Kevin, do you have something you'd like to bring up, please?
Yeah, thank you. Just to respond to Mr. Crowder and Mr. Quigley's comments there a little bit, just an acknowledgement that, the process, yes, it's felt quite clunky for ourselves as well. So I do acknowledge that. And just the timing of things, right? The series of events. So Over the past two presentations, hopefully we painted a clearer picture or, made it a little clearer. It was always the intent to analyze things under National Environmental Policy Act, and we did so in the EIS. All of these areas, including Lower Sycamore, were thoroughly analyzed. In fact, the alternative B, did have Lower Sycamore, but as Kelly mentioned, it was not selected for a number of reasons. It was to kind of help find that balance. So what we're seeking today is for a recommendation to approve all of the permit zones as presented, including Lower Sycamore. And we, will not do anything to implement any type of fee until we have addressed everything under NEPA for Lower Sycamore. And I know that's been a major sticking point for a number of reasons. So we did work through all of that. We met with Josh Hurst and Ginger Ritter, about a month ago, 6 weeks ago or so. And we did work through all that. We had quite the conversation, to make sure we were addressing everything. And our intent is really to work on that. So in our implementation plan and the budget figures that Kelly presented, that placeholder there is that's an open door for the department. So if there's an opportunity for us to help fund some of the resources needed to provide additional support and relief to Game and Fish, that avenue is still there. We do receive a lot of support from Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and I know at times they get taxed, for a variety of reasons. And that's part of their mission too, is to respond to that. So we have an existing cooperative law enforcement agreement, and we intend to continue that relationship and provide more resources to fund them to respond to these incidents. And one other thing that Kelly brought up earlier, just as a side note, that kind of goes along with these two comments, is that our law enforcement officers all agree that when we have a presence there, people are acting a little differently. They're more responsible. They're using their PPE. They're slowing down. You're not seeing a lot of the trash, the devastation, all those impacts to the resource. So by us having a presence there, we're seeing, more of a positive impact. And then on the flip side, right, there are concerns about us potentially an unintended consequences for that particular use to be forced elsewhere. So we have it in our forest plan. We have it in our travel management implementation plan, as well as this fee implementation plan, to have the resources to go out and monitor those areas. So that way, if there are other impacts occurring, it is our responsibility to work cooperatively with our stakeholders, including, Game and Fish Department, on addressing what those concerns are and taking appropriate action if we need to. So that's our intent, and we're going to keep those lines of communication open, and we'll continue to work in lockstep to address the challenges that we face.
Okay, thank you. Again, I echo everybody else's comments. You did an amazing job. Miss Ashton, are you still online?
I am.
Do you see where we're going with this? I mean, we've got the BLM coming in to make presentations too. You've got a RAC that just got trained by the Forest Service on what's going on, and that is one of my concerns, is that somehow or another we get you take this back to those people, their presentations, and discuss some of the things that we've brought up. I'm not suggesting you copy that or not. I'm just suggesting that me as a RAC member is going to, whether I like it or not, compare against the Forest Service, and not for good or bad, but for coverage. And so that to me is important, that you were there and listened to all that, because I know we have some coming up, and I know that they're very likely me asking a question like, well, why don't you do it like the Forest Service, which is probably not the right kind of question to ask. But we need to know what's going on, because as I said, this is just the beginning of this. And the other thing I would like to do as chairman of the RAC is have Dolores or somebody stick on their calendar March 15th every year to get the review of the of the Forest Service on this project, because success or failure on this thing could have a big response for me as a RAC member in what we do and what we don't do in the foreseeable future with other requests, and there's going to be a lot of them. And So I don't want this to slip in the cracks and we could just go to the other one without having a review of the other, of what we've already done. So if you'd help me out with that, I would really appreciate it. We're on a public comment period. JC, I would turn it over to you and Sharma and see if there's any other questions the RAC has. And then we will, you turn back for me and I'll ask for a vote.
We do have Eileen with a question. And then we can go ahead and turn it over to Sharma and
Fine.
JC.
Yeah, so kind of more of a comment. I saw on the Maricopa Association of Governments, they have a desert spaces plan from 1995, and they identify conservation and retention areas. So the conservation are really the outstanding open space areas, and retention, they're saying they're high value open space areas, but not as like outstanding as these areas that are set for conservation. And I noticed that a lot of the OHV areas are in that retention area. So I think I'll send that document to you guys, Devin and Kelly. And I think that also helped me to really understand the justification why these areas are maybe so good for OHV. And whereas you'll see that east, as the OHV areas, as you go east, you get into more of a conservation area. So I do think after looking at that MAG Desert Spaces plan, that helped me understand, you know, why these OHV areas were chosen. And then the other thing is I really wanted to go back through the public comments, and quite a few folks I saw that said no to fees also wanted to see more trash cleaned up, more presence. So they would say maybe they didn't want to see fees, but that they also want to see all these other things done. So I think that again shows that there's support. People want to see more of a presence, and that costs money, and I see your plan here to hire more staff. So yeah, wanted to commend you all. I know the planning process is challenging, but the hope is that it creates a better product in the end. So yeah, thank you all for your hard work on this.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from any of the RAC members? JC, you want to, if you don't have any comments, I guess the appropriate thing now would be to ask for a vote. If there's no comments from anybody, and you and China don't have any more comments, I will go ahead and we'll vote on passage of this as it has been explained, or we'll get a positive or negative vote. Is that okay with you, JC?
That's okay with me. I feel like all of my major concerns, or all of my concerns, have been addressed through the comments here, and I appreciate everybody's input. So it's really been helpful in clarifying everything. So I think we could go ahead, from my standpoint, into the vote.
And I also want to once again thank you for all the work you did. There's a lot of work in there that none of us really had to do because you guys did it for us, and I think I really truly do appreciate it, and I think you're going to find out you're going to be a lot more of them before long. So, with that in mind, Dolores, can we go around and get a vote?
Yes, absolutely. With that, I will utilize my list that goes based on category, and I'll just go down that list similar to the one we utilized for our roll call this afternoon. And Chairman Bill Brake, we'll start the votes with you.
Thank you. A reluctant yes.
Copy that. Yes. John J.C. Sanders.
I vote yes, subject to the requirement for the annual reporting on the results.
Copy that. Steve Trussell.
I vote aye.
Copy that. Allison Ellingson. How do you vote? Allison votes aye. I've got that in the comments. Thank you, Allison. Paul Baumgart.
I vote yes.
Copy that. Yes. Sharma Torrens.
I vote aye.
Aye. Copy that. Michael Quigley.
I vote nay.
Nay. Copy that. Eileen Batten.
I vote yes.
Okay. Aaron Devine.
Aaron Devine, yes vote.
Copy. Yes. Jill Bennell.
I vote yes, however, I vote no on the 40 hours for a fee waiver of volunteer hours. I don't know if that's possible. I think that's way too high.
Noted. Larry Howry.
I vote yes.
Robert Broshid.
I vote yes.
Julie Engel.
I vote aye.
Okay. Copy that. Yes. Paul David.
Yes.
Copy. Yes. Patrice Horstman.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Yes. Noted. With that, we've got a consensus of yes. We do have a no from Mr. Quigley and some conditional no's with regards to the fee waiver for volunteers and a reporting requirement, which we can definitely work with the Forest Service on to meet that from both the chair and the co-chair, Mr. Sanders.
Okay,
Turn it back to
Dorothy.
you, Mr.
Dorothy, as I understand it, we have enough of a quorum to pass this as a yes vote.
That is correct. We do have a full quorum, and that would be a yes.
Okay, so it's my understanding of what we've done in the past is I will write a note to the director and give him the results of our vote, and he will handle the conversation and the communication with the Forest Service. Is that correct?
That is correct. It'll be a similar process to the note that we did stating that we required more information, but in this case, it would be an acknowledgement of the yes, the concurrence with the plan as presented today, and with the mention to the reporting requirement or the reporting suggestion that has been made by the council for future RAC meetings.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to adjourn it. And I want to thank you all very much for, these are tough meetings. It was a lot easier for several of us to do this meeting like we did it today online. We just can't do that for all the meetings that we've already discussed. So I appreciate that. And any of you that are looking for a summer job out there and along the Beeline Highway to enforce these laws, you might enjoy that. It's about 115 out there now, and so this is an opportunity for employment for those that might enjoy that. And that was supposed to be funny, but we'll never know. Anyway, thank you all for everything, and have a good day, and thank you again for being one of the best RACs I've ever been involved in. You all are neat people, and I appreciate your time and effort. Thank you. So
Mr. Chair, I would like to maybe just open an opportunity before we close completely to see if there's any comments from our designated federal official, Jira. I think she might have popped off, but
no, I'm on.
Okay.
I'm looking for Teams icons and not the Zoom. So that's why I was like raising my hand sometimes through the then unmute, stop video, start video. So no, I don't have too much to say, Dolores. Just thank you to all the RAC members. As convenient as the virtual meetings are, they also are challenging to stay on screen like this and stay engaged and actively listening. So appreciate you all being here. Forest Service, great job. Appreciate you all showing up, and we may be in touch with you to follow up from the BLM side. So hopefully we can do that. That's all I have. Thank you, Dolores. Thank you, Amber, and thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Jira. Also, just to make mention, we do have 2 other meetings scheduled later this year. Those will be full sessions, one in October, the other in December. Those have been announced within our BLM or the Arizona Resource Advisory Council webpage. That can be found on our blm.gov/Arizona. Those will be, again, 2 full-day sessions. Most of that agenda will be business plans proposed by the Bureau of Land Management, and that information will go out to RAC members ahead of the meeting, ahead of each meeting. Michelle Ailport has placed the link to our Advisory Council webpage in the chat for everyone so that they can pin that. But, you know, we encourage folks, because they will be involving business plans. We have also have links to our business plans and some that are currently being looked at, as well as another batch that will be announced here shortly with possibly some other informational sessions related to those business plans. So I look forward to seeing you all as RAC members and the public at those meetings in the future. And if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to me, Dolores Garcia, DA Garcia, blm.gov, and I'll be happy to hear from you. With that, if there's nothing else, Chair, we can adjourn.
Dolores, I just want to, before we all get off, what a wonderful job you have done. Once again, you've kept me from a disaster, and I appreciate all the help that you've given me while you're taking a vacation. And we're very fortunate to have you as well. So thank you very much. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
You all have a great day.
Thanks.